You've been learning vocabulary the wrong way. In so many countries, the way that English vocabulary is taught is actually not conducive to using the vocabulary. I've taught thousands of students all over the world, and I used to live and teach English in South Korea. And I have found that the standard way of teaching English vocabulary is pretty similar in a lot of countries. So in many places, the way that they teach English vocab is to give students a list of so many words every single week. And the teachers just say, study, do it, study it, read the word and the definition. Done. And that's simply not useful. Students are not taught how to pronounce the word. They are not taught how to use the word in writing or in conversations. And they are not taught how those words are different from their synonyms. And this becomes a huge problem when students try to use the words in writing and speaking. And another massive problem with this is there is zero review. Even though teachers are usually taught about the learning curve, which shows that repetition and review is key to remember things, they don't implement this with the vocabulary studies that they give their students. So even though students are learning or studying so many words a week, sometimes hundreds of words a week, one of my biggest concerns that I get from students is that they lack vocabulary and that they can never remember words when they're talking or writing. So today I'm going to show you the absolute best way to study vocabulary. Now, this study method is not exclusive to English studying, but the resources that are in the guide that I'm going to show you are geared towards English, but you can still use the same principles for any language. I've already posted a video, which I'll link up at the top of the screen, whichever side it goes on, about how to master English vocabulary. And in that video, I go over a lot more resources that you can use to get your vocabulary words and to help with review. But today we are going to further discuss how to master that vocabulary using the 5x5 vocabulary study guide. So the 5x5 study guide is based on the psychology of how to learn and remember things with an emphasis on review. So in this study guide, you will practice 5 words a week, 5 days a week. That's it. Now you may be wondering, why only 5 words? Well, for one, do you have time to effectively study 20, 30, 40 words a week? No, you don't. If you study that many words a week, you will not be able to effectively learn and remember them to apply them in conversation and writing later. It's basically impossible. And secondly, I find that most people have an all or nothing approach to their studying. They feel like, oh, if I can't study 20 words, I might as well not study any. So by limiting it to 5 words a week, it's not going to take very much time, and you're not going to have that stress about not being able to devote an hour every day to your studying.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
It's only a few minutes a day. It's probably less time than you spend on Instagram. You can study 5 words a week, 5 days a week. I know you can. 20 words a week? Probably not. But 5? That's a habit you can stick with. So let's first get into how you can use this vocabulary guide. The first thing that you need to do is figure out what words you want to study. Over the past 10 years of teaching, I have found that the best vocabulary words that students should be studying are ones that they organically come across in their general English absorption. So whether you're reading a newspaper article and you find a word that you don't know, or if you're having a conversation with your English teacher, if you're watching Netflix or YouTube, if there are words that are used in those daily conversation settings, those are going to be the most useful words for you to study. It's probably not useful for you to study words from the GRE exam if you don't plan on taking the GRE. And I know this from personal experience because my friend took the GRE exam a few years ago, and he tried to use some of that vocabulary in daily conversation, and it was so weird. A lot of the exam-based vocabulary is not appropriate for a daily conversation. It is very strictly academic or formal. And if you did use that in conversation, people would look at you weird. And a lot of native English speakers don't even know those words. So don't waste your time with exam-based vocabulary if it is not useful for you and if you're not taking that exam. So now let's review the schedule for the 5x5 vocabulary guide. Now, in case you couldn't tell by the name of the 5x5 vocabulary guide, the general schedule for this is to study your vocab for 5 days a week. Now, that may sound like a lot, but each day you won't be spending a lot of time. So really, you might only be spending 5-10 minutes every day studying. So it's not a huge time commitment. So just a quick rundown of what you'll do each day. Day 1 is really just going to be about choosing your words and writing down their definitions and reviewing those a few times. Day 2 will focus on pronunciation. You will still review the definitions real quick because, again, reviewing is the key to mastering your vocabulary. So day 3 and 4 are more flexible because on one of the days, you need to use the words in conversation, and the other day, you will need to write sentences with the words. Now, I wanted to make these flexible because these ones are probably a little more time-consuming, and most likely, you'll need to schedule that conversation, whether it's with a friend who's also practicing English, or if you do take lessons in a classroom setting or with a private English tutor, like myself. So that's why these are flexible. Also, these ones might take a little bit more time. So if you wanted, you could do both of them on the same day. That's a lot of extra work, but I want to give you flexibility in your schedule because not everyone can follow the exact same schedule, okay? So day 3 and 4 are using the words in conversation and writing down sentences. Day 5 is something that I don't see any other teachers recommending, even though it is so important. And that's to look up synonyms for the words and figure out their differences. Because a lot of people just think that synonyms are exactly the same and they are interchangeable. But that's not correct. A lot of the synonyms have nuanced differences, and those are very important to learn so that you can be even more fluent and proficient in the language. By the end of the week, you'll have about this much information per word. Now let's go in depth into how you can complete 1 week of your 5x5 vocabulary study guide. So on day 1, you will first write down your words in the nice big yearly table. Then you'll move on to the definition page. So you'll write down the word, circle the part of speech, and write down the definition. So today I'm going to focus on the word comfortable. You can see here, I wrote it in the new word box. I circled the part of speech, it is an adjective, and wrote down the definition, providing physical ease and relaxation. So you'll do that with the rest of your words and then read and review a few times. Day 2 is one of my favorite days Now we are going to really hone in on the pronunciation. You can just Google how to pronounce this word. But I will mention, Google does have some limitations. So you can see here that on Google, they use the IPA or International Phonetic Alphabet to show how to pronounce the words. Now, for some people, this is very useful. However, I don't teach the IPA to my students because a lot of my students don't use the English alphabet for their own native language, and I'm not going to make them learn a separate alphabet. They're already having to learn the English alphabet, so adding on the IPA, that's just extra work. I find that most students have a good general understanding of the regular phonetic structure of the English alphabet, so we just stick with that. Most English learners and even native English speakers don't understand what these upside down E's mean. And I don't really get it either. I hate the IPA. So what I like students to do is just listen to the word and then write down what they hear. So for Google, it sounds like this.
Comfortable.
So from listening to that, here's what I would write down. Comfortable. 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 However, this is a little more of a formal pronunciation. Most native English speakers actually say it like this. Comfortable. So with the casual or native English speaker pronunciation, it kind of looks more like this. Comfortable. Comfortable. So you can choose if you want to practice the more formal, rigid pronunciation of words, or if you want to practice the more casual, native English speaking sounding way to pronounce the words. So again, I want you to write this down in whatever way makes sense for you. But what about languages that use a different alphabet? Well, if you're able to use those sounds from your native alphabet, use those. I think that's great. But there might be some limitations. So if your native language does not use the same alphabet, keep watching. But if your native language does use the same alphabet as English, you can skip ahead to this time. So for this example, I'm going to use the Korean alphabet that's called Hangul. Now, the awesome thing about Hangul is that it's broken up into syllables and each character is phonetic. So each character has one sound in most cases. But in English, a lot of the letters have different sounds. So that's why Korean Hangul is pretty awesome. But there are some limitations. But let's first look at what works with this word. So let's look at how we would pronounce this using Hangul. It sounds like comfortable. Now that's close, but not perfect. But first, let's look at the letters that are really good for the pronunciation. So we have the same K sound. The M sound is the same. The T sound is the same. And this final syllable, bull, is perfect. I wish that we had an English character for this sound that's in Korean because I love it. It's great. It makes sense. But unfortunately, there's no English equivalent for our alphabet. But the way that bull is written out in Hangul is just chef's kiss, perfection. But let's look at the limitations in this. So for that first vowel sound in comfortable, in the Korean version, it's an O sound. It's not a. Secondly, there's no F in the Korean language. So they use the character that has a P sound interchangeably for P and F. So I know that this is pretty common in Asian languages because there are just letters that are not used. Like in Japanese, the H and F are sometimes used interchangeably with one character. So that's something that you have to be careful about. The third limitation is this third syllable, ta, ta. Now, if you are doing the British pronunciation, they don't have hard R's, so they might pronounce comfortable like this.
Comfortable, comfortable.
In that case, ta, like it's written out here, would make sense. But for the American English pronunciation, it doesn't really work. Now, I'm going to show you my method for how I would take the Hangul version and kind of mix it with English for it to make sense. Sorry to my Korean viewers if you don't like this. I have shown this method to all my Korean students, and for most of them, it does make sense and they find it helpful. But when I showed it to my Korean husband, he was like, what is this? What did you do? So maybe this will work for you. Maybe it won't, but just check it out. So first, with that aw sound, I'm going to take that out and put in a U. You'll also notice in the natural pronunciation of comfortable, that first syllable has the M and F sound. So I'm just going to toss it in to that first syllable in Hangul. So you'll see here that we have added the English U and the F. So now the first syllable is comf, comf. Now, because we added those, I'm going to completely take out that second syllable of po because it's not correct. And in the natural way to say comfortable, there's only 3 syllables. After that, I'm going to completely take out that ta. Again, if you're doing the British pronunciation, it would be okay to keep that. But for the American pronunciation, it's tur, tur. And that just doesn't exist in the Korean phonetic alphabet. So I will just write that down in English. And like I said, for that last syllable, bull, it's perfect. There's no need to change it. So the final result is this kind of mishmash of English and Korean, and it looks like comfortable. I hope that didn't offend any Koreans. So try out this method of mixing the English alphabet with your native language's alphabet and see if that can help you remember and visualize the pronunciation of words a lot better. On day 3 and 4, this is when you'll practice using the words in conversation and you will write them in at least 3 different sentences. So for my students, if they specifically want to practice this vocabulary, they will send me their words in advance and I will make sure to find ways to bring them up in our conversation, or during our class, they'll just tell me, these are my words, let me use them in a sentence. So you can use them however you want. Maybe if you have a friend or a family member who is also practicing their English, you guys can do your English conversation practice together using your words of the week. But for your written sentences, it is extremely important to practice writing in the 3 main tenses where your verbs will change. So you'll write your sentence in past tense, present tense, and your perfect tense. I did not add future tense on here because the verb usage in future and present tense are pretty similar. So if you want, you can do a future tense instead of a present tense. It's up to you. Doesn't really matter. But I know for my students that past tense and perfect tense sentences can be a little bit tricky. So by writing in these tenses every week, you are going to improve your writing and your tense usage. Now, for this example, I used an adjective, so my word of the week will not change, but the verbs around it will change. And finally, on day 5, this is something that so many people neglect studying, and that's synonyms. Understanding the synonyms for your vocabulary words is essential for so many reasons. One, you'll be able to tell the nuanced differences between the words when you are reading them or listening to them. You'll be able to use them in different ways when you are speaking or writing. And if you are practicing for an English test or something, this will also give you a nice list of vocabulary so that you don't sound repetitive. Because in English exams, if you use the same word over and over again, you're not going to get as high of a score. Now, being repetitive in daily conversation isn't too much of a big deal, but this will also help you so that you can kind of show off all the different words that you know when you are speaking to someone. So it's pretty easy to find the synonyms. All you need to do is look up synonyms for whatever your word is. That's it. So for comfortable, I found the synonyms cozy, at ease, and well off. Now, how can you tell the difference between these words? Because often we can hear cozy and comfortable used interchangeably, but they do have a small difference. So just simply Google comfortable versus cozy. It's that simple. Google is going to be your best friend throughout your whole vocabulary learning journey. So we can see from our very simple Google search that cozy and comfortable are used interchangeably, but comfortable generally refers to the state of physical ease and relaxation, while cozy implies a feeling of warmth and intimacy and contentment. Then we can also see that at ease is free from stress or fear. Well off has more to do with finances or your standard of living. So you could use these words interchangeably in a conversation, but they do have their subtle differences. Like you cannot use well off and cozy interchangeably. Even though well off and cozy are related to comfortable, they're not related to each other. So you might be thinking, Cami, I only studied 5 words this week. That's not very impressive. However, you actually got to learn so many more words. Maybe on day 1, when you were writing down the definitions, there were some words in the definitions that you didn't know. Maybe for day 5, when you wrote down the synonyms, you learned new words from the synonyms or from those nuanced differences. So if we look at the completed synonym page, there could be potentially 7 new words that you learned. So instead of learning only 5 words, you actually learned about 12. And you have a good understanding of what these words on this page mean because you already studied their synonyms. So you can understand that impervious is similar to oblivious, or delineate is similar to depict. So you're actually learning a lot more than you realize. So congrats, you finished a week of your 5x5 vocabulary study guide. So how do you find words for next week? Well, go back onto that synonym page and use some of those words that you didn't know. Or again, you can find your words organically. Remember, you do have 2 days off with this study guide, so you can use those days to kind of think about the words that you want to use, write them down in the study guide, or just write them down in your phone, wherever you want to save your words, and then fill them in and get started the next week. So to review, day 1, choose your words and practice those definitions. Day 2, review those words and definitions and master that pronunciation. Day 3 and 4, review the definitions and pronunciation and use them in conversation and writing. Remember, these days are flexible, so don't feel stressed to follow the schedule exactly. And day 5 is finding those synonyms and figuring out the nuanced differences for those synonyms. So to get the 5x5 vocabulary study guide, you can check it out on Amazon for the physical copy, and it's only $10. Or for the downloadable PDF version, you can check out my website, Cami'sEnglishCorner.com. And if you want even more ways to improve your English this year, check out my free weekly planner, video coming on that soon, my free reading recommendation guide, which will also provide you with opportunities to find more vocabulary that you can use in this guy right here. And to practice using your new vocabulary even more, definitely check out my 365-day writing journey, where there are writing prompts for every day of the year that will provide you with excellent opportunities to improve your vocabulary, grammar, sentence structure, sentence organization, and so much more. So good luck with your vocabulary studies this year, and I can guarantee if you follow the methods in the 5x5 vocabulary study guide, you will vastly improve your English proficiency and fluency all throughout the year. I'll see you later.